Did you know that Pink Floyd recorded an entire album you were never meant to hear? And the reason behind it? A dangerous Mexican road race that killed 27 drivers and spectators. This is the story of Pink Floyd's lost soundtrack, and why it never made it to your record collection. In 1991, Pink Floyd wasn't on tour. They weren't recording. Instead, 3 members were about to risk their lives on one of the deadliest road races in the world. Guitarist David Gilmour, drummer Nick Mason, and their longtime manager Steve O'Rourke, all serious gearheads, decided to enter one of the world's most dangerous vintage car rallies, the Carrera Panamericana. But they didn't just do it for fun. They filmed the entire adventure, and in the process, created an entire Pink Floyd soundtrack for it. This isn't just a story about a lost album. It's about a band's creative spirit, finding an outlet in the most unlikely of places. But this passion project nearly ended in disaster. To really get the album, you first have to get the race. La Carrera Panamericana is not your average Sunday drive. It first ran in the early 1950s to celebrate the opening of the Pan American Highway in Mexico, and it quickly got a reputation for being brutally hard and incredibly dangerous. 27 drivers and spectators were killed in the first 5 years, spanning thousands of kilometers on public roads, often through treacherous mountain passes with unpredictable conditions. The original race was a magnet for the world's best drivers, and a spectacle of pure speed and chaos. It was so perilous that it was cancelled after just 5 years. When the race was revived in 1988 for vintage and classic cars, it kept its legendary status and its spirit of high-risk adventure. This was the event that called to Gilmour, Mason, and O'Rourke. Nick Mason, especially, is a well-known and respected driver in historic racing, with a car collection that would make a museum curator weep. For these rock stars, it was a chance to swap the stage for the driver's seat. So, the decision was made to film their adventure, and a film starring members of Pink Floyd would, of course, need a Pink Floyd soundtrack. And here's the craziest part. Some of these songs are among Pink Floyd's last true collaborations. So why, in the early 90s, did this project grab their attention? You have to remember where Pink Floyd was at the time. They were coming off the massive success of the Momentary Lapse of Reason album and its world tour, which had re-established them as a stadium-filling powerhouse, even without Roger Waters. After the tour wrapped in 1990, the band took a much-needed break. There wasn't any immediate pressure to record a new album. David Gilmour was now the clear leader, and keyboardist Rick Wright was, for the first time since the mid-70s, back in the creative mix. The whole vibe was different from the tense, conflict-filled sessions of their later years with Waters. There was a feeling of freedom, of friendship. The Carrera Panamericana project wasn't a calculated career move. It was a passion project. It was something they could do together, outside the immense pressure of creating the next official Pink Floyd studio album. It was basically the perfect side quest for a band that had just finished conquering the world and was figuring out what to do next. The race itself was every bit as dramatic as its reputation. Nick Mason and his co-driver, auto racer Valentine Lindsay, were impressively skilled, finishing 8th overall. David Gilmour's experience was a lot more harrowing. During one stage, he crashed his car. While Gilmour was okay, his co-driver and band manager, Steve O'Rourke, suffered a broken leg. The crash was a stark reminder of the real danger involved. That whole raw experience, the adrenaline, the speed, the danger, and the stunning Mexican landscapes became the backdrop for the music. In November 1991, the band went into Olympic Studios in London to record the soundtrack. The film's score is a fascinating mix of existing Pink Floyd tracks and brand new music. Songs from A Momentary Lapse of Reason, like Signs of Life and Sorrow, were woven into the film. But the real gold for fans are the original instrumental pieces written just for the documentary. And these weren't just David Gilmour solo tracks. Songs like Pan Am Shuffle and Carrera Slow Blues were credited to Gilmour, Wright, and Mason. This was a huge deal. It was the first time Rick Wright had gotten a co-writing credit on a Pink Floyd song since Wish You Were Here back in 1975. And for Nick Mason, while he had received a credit on Signs of Life a few years earlier, this was a return to collaborative songwriting, not seen since The Dark Side of the Moon. After years of being sidelined, the original members were jamming again, laying down these atmospheric, bluesy, and powerful instrumentals that were a direct reflection of the race, sprawling, cinematic, and totally driven by Gilmour's soaring guitar. With all this fantastic new music featuring the reunited core of the band, the obvious question is, why wasn't there ever an official soundtrack album? The film itself came out on VHS and Laserdisc in 1992, so it was commercially available, but a standalone album never appeared. To this day, the only official way to hear these unique tracks is by listening to the audio from the film, though bootlegs and fan-made compilations have been circulating for years. There's no single, simple reason why the album was shelved. It was likely a mix of things. First, the music was made specifically for the film. It was meant to score the visuals of the race, not to be a standalone studio album. Gilmour might have felt it was too specialized or incomplete for a major commercial release. Second, the creative energy from these sessions quickly rolled into a much bigger project, the recording of what would become 1994's The Division Bell. The positive experience of jamming on the Carrera soundtrack was probably a perfect warm-up, proving that the three of them could still create powerful music together. Once they shifted focus to a full-blown Pink Floyd album, the smaller soundtrack project was likely pushed to the back burner. And finally, there could have been tricky rights and licensing issues tied to the film that made a separate album release too complicated. Whatever the reason, it was left in the archives, becoming a holy grail for die-hard collectors. Listening to the La Carrera Panamericana tracks today is a fascinating experience. The music is a perfect bridge between the polished 80s sound of a momentary lapse of reason and the more expansive, collaborative feel of the Division Bell. The new stuff is almost all instrumental, letting Gilmour's guitar take the spotlight. Carrera Slow Blues is just what it sounds like, a moody, evocative blues track that shows off the incredible chemistry between Gilmour's guitar and Wright's keyboards. Panam Shuffle is more upbeat and driving, perfectly capturing the feeling of freedom on the open road. You can literally hear the seeds of the Division Bell being planted here. The atmospheric textures, the focus on instrumental jams, and the obvious chemistry between Gilmour, Wright, and Mason all point directly to the sound they would perfect on their final studio album. The Carrera soundtrack is more than just a weird little one-off. It's a vital piece of the band's evolution in their final chapter. It's the sound of a band rediscovering its creative spark, not in a recording studio, but through the shared thrill of a wild adventure. Of course, La Carrera Panamericana isn't the only ghost in the Pink Floyd machine. The band's history is full of legendary what-if projects. Probably the most famous is Household Objects. After the insane success of The Dark Side of the Moon, a creatively exhausted Floyd tried to record an album using no traditional musical instruments. They used things like stretched rubber bands, aerosol cans, and wine glasses. After weeks of frustration, the project was scrapped, though some of the sounds they created ended up in Shine on You Crazy Diamond. Then there was Spare Bricks. This was originally going to be a soundtrack for the 1982 film The Wall, with re-recorded versions of songs and unused material from the album sessions. But that project got derailed by Roger Waters' growing obsession with the Falklands War, and it eventually morphed into the 1983 album The Final Cut. And even the sessions for the Division Bell produced their own lost album. The band recorded hours of ambient instrumental jams that their engineer, Andy Jackson, compiled into a single, hour-long piece he called The Big Spliff. For 20 years it sat in the vaults, until Gilmour and Mason revisited the tapes and used them as the foundation for Pink Floyd's final album, 2014's The Endless River. Each of these lost projects tells a piece of the Pink Floyd story. But La Carrera Panamericana is unique. It wasn't born from creative burnout or fighting within the band. It was born from a shared joy, a passion for speed, and a spirit of adventure. It's the sound of a band reconnecting. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The film and its music are a fascinating snapshot of a moment in time, a glimpse into the lives of rock royalty who chose to risk it all on the dusty backroads of Mexico. It shows that even for a band as legendary and well-documented as Pink Floyd, there are still stories hidden in the margins, still roads to explore, and still a legendary soundtrack that never quite made it to the record stores. It just goes to show that sometimes the most interesting journeys are the ones that take an unexpected detour.